Hi, Robert Burris here. I wanted to pick up this study again of Dr. Stephen Hick's book, Explaining Postmodernism, which I've neglected for a little bit. Um, Continuing in chapter 6, I believe it is, which is the dealing with this postmodern strategy. And it's a little hard to relate on a electronic book reader here. It's hard to relate where I'm at in terms of page numbers, but um, last time we were on this topic, we were moving into a discussion of how postmodernism is very closely tied to Marxism. As a matter of fact, this next heading is when theory clashes with fact. Theory meaning the theory of postmodernism, language being virtually nothing but deception, yet we can learn from it if we thrash away all of the chaff, which most of it is chaff, and get at some mystical kernel of truth. That's the proposition of postmodernism, or at least that's the stated purpose of postmodernism, the stated root of it. I think maybe this one little chapter here, right before we get to the heading, when theory clashes with fact, is worth reiterating. If we now add to the postmodern epistemology of language the far left politics of the leading postmodernists and their first-hand awareness of the crisis of socialist thought and practice, then the verbal weaponry has to become explosive. Some of the last points we dealt with discussed how language is actually rhetoric, becomes primary purpose of language used as a weapon, and spoke about ways that that was put into practice by postmodernists. And of course, far left politics is a staple among them. When theory clashes with fact, in the past 2 centuries, many strategies have been pursued by socialists the world over. Socialists have tried waiting for the masses to achieve socialism from the bottom up, and they have tried imposing socialism from the top down. They have tried to achieve it by revolution, or I'm sorry, I'm skipping a little ahead, by evolution and by revolution. They have tried versions of socialism that emphasize industrialization, and they have tried those that are agrarian. They have waited for capitalism to collapse by itself, and when that did not happen, they tried to destroy capitalism by peaceful means. And when that did not work, some tried to destroy it by terrorism. I'm glad he mentioned that, because at first that little pause there, I was thinking of the terrorism aspects. And I'm hard pressed to think on my own of the peaceful means. Maybe the peaceful means is our Federal Reserve System and the fascist alliance that our government has with the banksters, and how they've been bleeding the wealth of the common man away. And anyway, maybe that's it. That's pretty peaceful, right? But capitalism continues to do well, and socialism has been a disaster. Boy, ain't that the truth. All you have to do is study the history of the 20th century in particular. In modern times, there have been over 2 centuries of socialist theory and practice, and the preponderance of logic and evidence has gone against socialism. Um, well, I've studied Marxism enough to recognize through the words of the Marxist himself that logic and evidence just doesn't matter. There is accordingly a choice about what lesson to learn from history. If one is interested in truth, then one's rational response to a failing theory is as follows. And he's going to make this case that I just make the case for what I just said about Marxism being irrational. And in fact, I'm glad to have his input on this because it merely it confirms, what I've come to my own conclusion about Marxism, that it's just irrational. And of course, postmodernism being spawned out of Marxism is irrational also. If one is interested in truth, then one's rational response to a failing theory is as follows. And he gives a list of bullet points here. One breaks the theory down into its constituent premises. Second point. One questions its premises vigorously and checks the logic that integrates them. Third bullet point. One seeks out alternatives to the most questionable premises. And the fourth, one accepts moral responsibility for any bad consequences of putting a false theory into practice. Boy, ain't that the truth. This is not what we find in postmodern reflections on contemporary politics. So true. Truth and rationality are subjected to attack, and the prevailing attitude about moral responsibility is again best stated by Rorty, and he quotes Rorty here. I think that a good left is a party that always thinks about the future and doesn't care much about past sins. Yeah, that's, what's interesting though. I might disagree with Rorty about that. The sins under Stalinism in particular, hadn't really come to light until maybe the last 10 or 20 years. And even then, most Americans seem oblivious to that period. I'm reading some other books dealing with Gulag, the Soviet Gulag system, and the discussion in the first parts of this one particular book by Anne Applebaum, book entitled Gulag. She talks about the paucity of historical evidence available to researchers until nearly the time when she began her research. How the doors were opening up in the Soviet Union to get into archives. And particularly in our public schools in America, it just wasn't really discussed much. Particularly the way that Leninism paved the way for Stalinism to develop. Okay, so we're at a new heading here, Kierkegaardian postmodernism. Kierkegaard was a Danish philosopher. I like to remember him for his inability to draw a distinction between faith and doubt. He felt like you couldn't do that, and that essentially he said that faith was founded on doubt, really, in that sense, giving doubt prominence. And, he was a religious man, so he was a conundrum. And he's best known for this irrational doctrine of um, confusion, faith, and doubt. In chapter 4, I sketched one postmodern response to the problems of theory and evidence for socialism. For an intelligent, informed socialist confronted with the data of history, a crisis of belief has to occur. A crisis of faith. Oh, this is beautiful. Socialism is to many a powerful vision of a beautiful society, one that envisages an ideal social world that will transcend all of the ills of our current one. It's a religion. Marxism is a religion. Any such deeply held vision comes to form part of the very identity of the believer. Very true. And that is under postmodernism, of course, naturally being an extension of Marxism. Same thing is true. The thing that I find most difficult in having discussions, rational discussions, in America in 2011 is the fact that people are diseducated, and as a substitute for education and a rational concept of truth, they cleave so tightly to their cherished beliefs that it's like you declare war on them when you challenge those beliefs. So identity is a real problem. This white knuckle type of clinging to ideas as if you derive your sense of identity from them. And it's good to identify with good ideas. It's also good to disassociate from bad ideas when you find out they're bad. That's part of the point being made here. Any such deeply held vision comes to form part of the very identity of the believer, and any threat to that the vision has to be experienced as a threat to the believer. From the historical experience of other visions that have run into crises of theory and evidence, we know that there can be a powerful temptation to block out theoretical and evidentiary problems and simply to will oneself into continuing to believe. Religion, for example, has provided many such instances. 10,000 difficulties, he quotes, wrote Cardinal Newman. Quote, do not make one doubt, unquote. Well, unfortunately, religionists, theologians, uh, they've really despised intellectual rigor, it seems, and that's been a canard with them. Fyodor Dostoevsky made the point more starkly in a letter to a woman benefactor. Quote, if anyone had written to me that the truth was outside of Christ, I would rather remain with Christ than with the truth, unquote. Well, here's the thing. How about knowing the Bible well enough, knowing uh, Christ well enough, and being engaged in a scholarly fashion in the things of Christ, where one can defend Christ as truth. What's wrong with that? We also know from historical experience that sophisticated epistemological strategies can be developed precisely for the purpose of attacking the reason and logic that have caused problems for the vision. Vision being Marxism, the promise of Marxism in this case. Such were part of the explicit, well, and also I guess Dr. Hicks would, since he's drawn a comparison here, the vision, a messianic vision of the future for Christians, for instance. Such were part of the explicit motivations of Kant's first critique, Schleiermacher's On Religion, and Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling. So he's listing three works there, philosophical works, that were an attack on, essentially attack on rationality. Why not? He's asking if this is true for religion. Why not for the far left? The modern histories of religion and socialism exhibit striking parallels in development. I gotta hand it to him there. Can't argue against that. As a matter of fact, emergence has a very strong affinity for Marxism. The theologians of who are favored by the emergence are Marxists through and through, and they leaven Christianity with Marxism. Can't argue there. So he's going to give us a list here of some reasons here. Modern histories of religion and socialism exhibit striking parallels. A list of parallels here. Bullet point 1. Both religion and socialism started with a comprehensive vision that they believed to be true, but not based on reason. In parenthesis, various prophets, semicolon, Rousseau. So he's making Rousseau a prophet of Marxism and criticizing the prophets of the Bible, I guess. Both visions, or well, actually, I think, one can also rightly criticize the false prophets of religion who have traveled outside the Bible, promoting heresies. Second bullet point, both visions were then challenged by visions based on rational epistemologies. Early naturalist, early naturalist critics of religion on one side, early liberal critics of socialism on the other. Again, he's given a couple of examples in each case for each parallel. Third parallel, both religion and socialism responded by saying that they could satisfy the criteria of reason. In parenthesis, natural theology, scientific socialism. Natural theology on the side of religion, scientific socialism on the side of Marxism. Fourth parallel and bullet point, both religion and socialism then ran into serious problems of logic and evidence. An example, in parenthesis, Hume's attacks on natural theology for religion, and Mises and Hayek's attacks, or Mises and Hayek's attacks on socialist calculation on the side of socialism or Marxism. And almost losing count to my excitement. Did I fire 5 shots or fire 6? Well, this is the 5th shot here that Dr. Hicks fires as a parallel. Both then responded in turn by attacking reality and reason. On the side of religion, Kant and Kierkegaard. on the side of Marxism, postmodernists. Good job, Dr. Hicks. By the end of the 18th century, religious thinkers had available to them Kant's sophisticated epistemology. Kant told them that reason was cut off from reality, and so many abandoned natural theology and gracefully used his epistemology, or gratefully used his epistemology. I don't think they were all that graceful, were they? To defend religion. By the middle of the 12th century, left thinkers had available to them sophisticated theories of epistemology and language that told them that truth is impossible, that evidence is theory laden, that empirical evidence never adds up to proof, that logical proof is merely theoretical, that reason is artificial and dehumanizing, and that one's feelings and passions are better guides than reason. Well, that's postmodernism in a nutshell, or at least that's the expression of it, the manifestation of it. And and I don't blame him for saying that it's the same as religion. I find that our churches haven't abandoned the Bible, haven't abandoned the rational defense of the Bible, its history, in its claims upon the cosmos, in its appeal to humanity for rationality in terms of history and the cosmos. I don't blame him one bit in the failure of the church to intellectually defend the faith. The Bible tells us to be ready to give a defense. And yet I find more and more Christians just fail at that. Not all. There's been some that have been great and striven very hard to know the Bible, to engage their various areas of study, and to to reason with the secular world. But there's been tremendous failure also, and that's where we get rise to the socialist arm of the church, the emergence, the socialist theosophical arm. I shouldn't even talk about emergence. I start to get my dander starts to get up, and I start to get congested. When I think about the apostasy and the wasted years, that and I wasted my youth. The prevailing skeptical dang, my power just went out. Oh, there it is. The prevailing skeptical and irrationalist epistemologies in academic philosophy thus provided the left with a new strategy for responding to its crisis. What he's talking about there is a general failure a breakdown in response to Kant and Kierkegaard of rationalism, breakdown of rationalism in response to those guys saying that reality was disconnected from well, let me think he says it better than I do. That reason was cut off from reality. I was going to say that reality is cut off from reason. Same thing. So he's saying there was a breakdown. and that came to fruition, and then the Marxists, who rode that wave, saw a good opportunity, and which led to the development of postmodernism. So I guess I'll now that I've tried to explain that, I'll reread that last sentence. The prevailing skeptical, irrationalist epistemologies in academic philosophy thus provided the left with a new strategy for responding to its crisis, a scapegoat, provided them a scapegoat, also an opportunity to argue for continued social experiments. They could argue that with diseducated stooges like myself. Any attack on socialism in any form could be brushed aside and the desire to believe in it, socialism, reaffirmed. Those who adopted this strategy could always tell themselves that they were simply functioning, as Kuhn said, the scientists themselves function by bracketing the anomalies, setting them aside, and then going on with their feelings. I agree, but also, and maybe I'm Dr. Hicks is, PhD in philosophy. This is what he does for a living. Undoubtedly, is much more studied than I am. Something that really stuck with me, and I think I might have mentioned before, in trying to understand Marxism better, was I started reading through a Marxist dictionary, dictionaries, which is interesting. Like Rorty saying he has a new vocabulary, they take and redefine things, and the the most mind blowing uh, definition that I recall from that is their definition of a concrete concept. And I sought that out because I just felt like that uh, was a pivot. That's not a real good metaphor, but that was a key to understanding the mind of a Marxist. And their definition was that a concrete concept was a combination of a multitude of abstractions, of many abstractions. They didn't say multitude, many abstractions. What that said, abstract concept is like a theory. It's sort of like a guess. In other words, there's this tenuous nature to it. It's not proven. It's not. It's a symbol. There's symbolism in it, and it's a abstraction is an important method for men with limited perception, limited knowledge, trying to get a grip on the world and survive. And so we have intuition. Intuition is kind of in the realm of abstraction. We make a guess. Maybe this is the way the world works. In science, we take our educated guesses and then we test them. And when we nail down truth, we're dealing then with concrete concepts. When we sufficiently tested a thing, and we can say that we can talk about in the realm of electronics, electricity. We can talk about voltage being equal to current times resistance. That's a concrete concept. We tested that. It's a mathematical truism for us. Sure enough, it works. We put current through wires. We um, have resistors in there or something that provides resistance in a circuit. Measure voltage coming from a source of power. Voila. That or voltage, measure voltage, has been successfully predicted. So we're dealing with a concrete concept there, an equation of power. That's far removed, though, from the abstract thought that led the fellow, forget who came up with Volta. I think Volta, volts are named after Volta, a guy named Volta, if I'm not mistaken. And then Ohm, Ohm's law, so the resistors, and I think Coulomb, was that a guy? It's that Coulomb is the unit of amperage, or no, ampere. I don't know my history of this very well, but there's guys responsible for figuring this stuff out, and I'm the beneficiary of it. It's a concrete concept. It works. I've measured. I've got a multimeter, and I can measure these things. No need to mystify it. The only thing that's mysterious about it right now for me is the specific history of it. But that's all. Now, if I'm going to design a circuit, there's some abstraction in that. There's a little bit of abstraction in that, especially if I'm experimenting, trying to accomplish something that's not been heretofore accomplished. But that's the picture. So there's a line of separation there. That's my point. I didn't mean to get off, but there's a line of separation there between the abstract and the concrete. And the concrete is what you want. That is something you can, for lack of a better way to put it, and to use a metaphor, stand upon. You can rest upon the concrete. The abstract doesn't hold water in and of itself. You have to have something solid to hold water. Okay? But Marxism says the concrete concept is a combination of many abstractions. Poppycock. All right. So he's saying that a convenient way that Kuhn was saying that scientists deal with problems, experimental failures, if you will, or theoretical crises, by bracketing the anomalies, setting them aside, and then going with their feelings. Well, that's BS. That is total BS. They don't just go with their feelings. No, let's not get bogged down. You know I get bogged down, right? 34 minutes. I'm going to try to come to a conclusion here for this video. Okay, continuing on to quote the book, Explaining Postmodernism. On this hypothesis, then, postmodernism is a symptom of the far-left crisis of faith. Postmodernism is the result of using skeptical epistemology, skeptical meaning that there's no overarching idea that the world ought to make sense, that truth is knowable, that we can progress in knowledge, objective knowledge, and So that's the skepticism. Basically, it's kind of a gloom and doom, lost in the wilderness mentality. And you just got to kind of mentally crawl up in a ball and think happy thoughts. And maybe if you do good things, karma will bless you, that sort of thing. Very mystical mentality. Postmodernism is a result of using skeptical epistemology to justify the personal leap of faith. There's Kierkegaard right in there. Necessary to continue believing in socialism. Kierkegaardian. On this hypothesis, the prevalence of skeptical and irrationalist epistemologies in the middle of the 20th century alone is not sufficient explanation of postmodernism. A dead end of skepticism and irrationalism does not predict to what uses skepticism and irrationalism will be put. A desperate person or movement can appeal to those epistemologies as a defense mechanism, but who or what movement is desperate depends on other factors. In this case, socialism is the movement in trouble, but socialism's troubles alone are not sufficient explanation either. Unless the epistemological groundwork is laid, any movement that appeals to skeptical and irrationalist arguments will simply be laughed out of court. It should be. It's ridiculous. Therefore, it is a combination of the two factors, widespread skepticism about reason and socialism being in crisis, that is necessary to give rise to postmodernism. In other words, it's a justification in need of a. Maybe that's not good. I was going to say it's a justification in need of a theory. Actually, it's a theory coming to the rescue of a. No. See, there you go. I'm starting to become a postmodernist, ain't I? Never mind what he said. And what he said was, therefore, it is a combination of the two factors, widespread skepticism about reason and socialism being in crisis, that is necessary. Those two things are necessary to give rise to postmodernism. Yet this Kierkegaardian explanation of postmodernism is incomplete as an account of postmodern strategy. Far left thinkers who are crushed by the failings of socialism, for left thinkers who are crushed by the failings of socialism, the Kierkegaardian option, the leap of faith, provides the justification needed for continuing to believe in socialism as a matter of personal faith. But for those who still want to carry on the battle against capitalism, the new epistemologies make other strategies possible. Postmodernism offers this epistemology. Again, can't know truth, blah, 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 rhetoric, and deconstruction. Well, he starts a new heading here. I think I'll save that for next time. Put a little bookmark in there. Maybe I'm the only one that's interested in this, but maybe I've covered enough of this in video that at least for those that want to read the book and start to cut their teeth on some good information that we didn't get in public school. Uh, I think this book on postmodernism is a worthy uh, book to study for a person like me who understands that things have gone horribly wrong, and that we're dealing not only with a fiscal uh, crisis, social crisis, but basically it comes down to a mental crisis in America. Um, Really, I've been convinced of that, of a breakdown. And studying Marxism, which I began, oddly enough, with Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and who spent 8 years in Stalin's Gulag, wrote a great literary book chronicling history of the gulags that is as best he could construct it, and which is both very entertaining and, in my opinion, extremely educational. And beginning my studies in Marxism with that, seeing the craziness in it, the irrationality, and then wanting further to explore the roots of the irrationality, finding little gems like that statement about concrete concept, the confusion, seeing the confusion there, the willful confusion, and then of course uh, having being the benefactor of Dr. Hick's work and having him um, put the well-deserved label of irrational on it, which I knew is just plain crazy. But irrationalism speaks of a failure to process language, to communicate, to think logically. So it's much better. Crazy is just kind of pejorative, I think. But irrational, that it says something about the character of this problem, this illness, and it is an illness. It's a strategy for Marxism, but um, Marxism, Solzhenitsyn discussed in the Gulag Archipelago, and of course Applebaum discusses it to some extent. I haven't finished her book yet. I have finished Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, and there was discussions in there about re-education, and basically, which was a perversion of education, the educational system that existed at the time, to for the purpose of indoctrinating people. And Solzhenitsyn grew up in an indoctrination system like that. He grew up. I'm trying to think. He mentioned some historical context for his birth, but basically, he was a child of the Leninist revolution, and growing up under the reign of Stalin, going to school, being thoroughly indoctrinated in Marxism, rejecting the Orthodox Christianity of his parents and their rejection of communism, their criticism of it. He was down for the struggle, went into the military, uh, thoroughly Marxist, uh, soldier for Stalin, and got arrested just for wanting to be critical, rightly critical the failures of the Stalinist government. And it came around, and his Marxism came around and bit him in the rear in a big way. And he repented when he got put into Gulag. Saw the error of his ways, was humbled by it, and he renounced Marxism. Uh, and he saw the irrationality of it. The interesting thing about people who are in mental crisis is there's, and I mentioned this before, and I need to wrap this up pretty soon, is that there is a logic operating. So there's a temptation for them, even though they know the world seems alien, and they often express feeling like they're the only one who's sane, because they're operating on certain, their thinking is based on certain premises, and they're, for them, the rest of the world doesn't see it their way, in general. I'm speaking in generalities here, but there is a logic operating, and of course, the promise of psychotherapy was based on the idea that a person firmly grounded in reality, understanding something about the way the mind operates could help lead that person back, to the rational world. And so postmodernism is a screwed up logos, a screwed up mentality, and it, I guess the idea that I'd like people to consider is that if it is possible, and it was done in the past, more so than it's been done now, but psychotherapy was fairly successful for quite a few people, and if it's possible to talk somebody back to the rational world, it's possible to talk somebody, to use the term loosely, into the irrational world. And that's what essentially has been done in postmodernism. People have embraced it. That didn't mean they became insane or anything right away, but the logos is ingrained. The logos, the phony logos of postmodernism, is ingrained in our culture now, and people are clinging to relative truth, and they identify with these truths that they think are truths. They identify with them strongly, and feel like an attack on their truths is an attack on them. And so communication just breaks down. There's very little basis for, rational discussion, in the realm of politics, and particularly when you have Marxists who aren't victims to postmodernism, but more likely are pimps of it, that, peddle postmodernism, that interject it. Maybe there aren't too many of those people, and because it's a kind of a form of interjecting babble, confusion and circular thinking into conversation discourse, that basically it kind of, once it takes hold, it kind of perpetuates itself a bit. And that for me, about 50 minutes into this, and I've kind of been running on and whatnot, and getting congested again. For me, the Bible made all the difference. Studying the Bible, which I didn't do with a great deal of enthusiasm at first, but God has been gracious, to teach me provide me with good teachers. And what I mean to say about the Bible in this context is that I recognized that I was a diseducated stooge in atheism, and what taught me a love for words and a desire to be better at language and more tenacious at trying to get a grip on meaning in language and communication was the Bible, because I was indoctrinated with the idea it was just a bunch of fables that only a fool would put stock in it. That of course, religion. There's some religionists that say it's you don't want to take it literally, but there's something good there, and yet the people that really understand it are people that dig into it. That and I've learned to look at the Greek and the Hebrew, and long story short on that is it's Bible study, the Bible that led me out of Marxism, led me out of postmodernism, got me interested again in philosophy and in history and really getting an education. Uh, the Bible made the world make sense for me, and it's not a blind faith. I test it, and it is tested the more I study other things. But yet I find it to be solid, and I'm prepared to defend it. Well, better wrap this up. See you later.